going to start with you, James, because you're on the investment side. We're dealing with, hasn't been a good year for cannabis stocks, to say the least, in a free fall. You think everybody, the herd, would be running out the door as fast as they could. But a study that came out of the States said, in fact, the opposite holds true. 79% of Canadians, 74% of Americans still find this industry appealing. And clearly, this is indexed to the younger investor versus the older one. But are these people smoking their own portfolio?
A lot of portfolios have been hurt this year, no lie, but I think what we saw was correlation to the Canadian market, which suffered a really bad retail rollout last year. And there were some other issues, and we won't get into those, but what people are forgetting is there's a very healthy and vibrant and growing US cannabis market. Big MSOs, multi-state operators operating on all legal states. So the correlation of their stock prices and what's happened in Canada needs to be decoupled. And then I think you'll start seeing some truth that the market's actually bigger than what people are valuing today.
So what's your spider sense on this? Because I heard a lot of this in Canada and we went up through the roof. I remember my taxi driver saying he was taking a loan on his credit card to buy cannabis stock. Do you think this is just an anomaly, a speed bump, and we're going to see the kind of returns to this market that James is asking?
Look, I think there's absolutely opportunity in this market, but where the winners are going to be defined are the ones that create brands. I mean, look, okay, I work for Philip Morris, right? The largest tobacco company, or at least one of the largest tobacco companies in the world. We don't sell tobacco, we sell brands. So we sell Belmont, we sell Rothmans, we sell Next, Marlboro, IQOS, which is our new heated tobacco product. That's where...
This is quickly turning into a shameless plug there.
Isn't it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Anyway, that's where the value is, because if you just keep selling commodity product, it becomes a race to the bottom. And if you want to protect margins, you need to build brands. And the ones that are going to be able to do that are the ones that are going to win.
John Carlos, how do you look at this whole market?
They're both right. Brand identification, recognition is critical, but you have to build a brand. But I think this is just the tip of the iceberg, Tony. I think, you've got the whole market for infusibles and edibles and tinctures and oils opening up. This is going to be huge. You're talking about displacing pharma, perhaps, as a medicinal resource. This is how big CBD and CBN and all the offshoots of cannabis can be. That's why you have, I think, big pharma and big tobacco just lurking in the background, waiting to pounce. And to Seti's point, I think brand is very critical, but there's also the medicinal side.
Yep. So James, you're hold on, James. You're frothing a lot when you're talking south of the border, but I look up at Canada, and I consider it somewhat of a bong show. I mean, we're not allowed packaging. We're in some markets, 10 provinces, 3 territories, no set, no scale. I mean, we've attracted a lot of capital. Do you think there's still sort of a 2.0 for Canada where we can get our act together and become a dominant player in terms of building the brands that SETI's calling for, global brands?
I think we've learned some things, but I think if you look at the bigger Canadian players, again, they're trying to make their mark outside of Canada. Canada's not a big market. You know this from the cigarette business. It's, I mean, it's a good market, but it's not...
It's not bad.
It's not bad. But let me just say this. The one thing you need to look at, the Cannabis 2.0 or 3.0 will be the entrance of the global market. So you're going to have Europe, which is a medical-focused market. You're going to have the UK. You're going to have all these countries that have early days still in the cannabis sector. So don't discount the fact that a Canadian company can still operate like a Canopy or someone like that and build a brand through those markets and those channels, which are still very nascent.
So are we in a situation where Canada is going to lose that first mover advantage because we're standing still where these new markets are going to come in and bring out the brands that you're calling for, bring out the kind of packaging and the retail environment that actually consumers covet?
I wouldn't go there. I don't think we're going to lose that. If anything, now that we are opening up the markets to the edibles and all this other offshoot of the industry, I think we're going to continue to have the first mover advantage. And if anything, countries around the world are looking to Canada's regulatory model to see how we did it. So we are an example for the rest of the world. For example, we're about 3 to 4 years ahead of Australia right now. And Australia is going through the same motions and steps that Canada did 3 to 4 years ago. So I think we're well positioned.
Flows through Canada as well. I mean, that's really where we hang our hat. No.
So you're the capital markets, you've attracted it, you're feeling bullish, but this group is actually should be feeling this way, that it's a bit of a speed bump. But we're looking for a very big and prosperous world.
Big. Just don't buy into the story of new grow opportunities if they're domestic. Don't buy someone who's telling you the story that I'm going to grow another field.
The story is a farm. You're selling it's a cash crop. It doesn't matter whether you're growing cannabis or eggplants, right? I mean, you're just growing a crop. I mean, if you want to kind of get into the value chain from sort of seed to spliff.
I don't know, hear those eggplant splits or something.
Yeah.
Okay, let me roll you in.
All right,
the next
there you go,
topic.
I'll do on that one.
Another topic that's a lot of, is it hype or is it reality? Beyond meat. Plant-based, you know, there's a move to vegetarian, taking less meat out of my diet. There's also a lot of people are saying, I don't want to eat animals anymore. So there's obviously consumer demand. A herd is moving in a certain direction. These guys came out and said, we figured out the Beyond Meat. We've got the product. And they got a few things come back at them. Are you really not that healthy? Or, you know, it's you know,
It's still processed, Tony. It's still processed.
It's still processed. So tell me, do you think Beyond Meat and is this a fad? Because we've seen Tim Hortons pull back. We've seen McDonald's go ahead lukewarm results. They're saying, well, now we got Subway. Is the same thing going to happen? You're going to have a half a dozen people that come in asking for this, but really, when I go to a burger joint, I want a burger.
Well, yeah. I mean, listen, you got to figure out what the value proposition is. I mean, for me, this has almost got fidget spinner written all over it. I mean, I still remember when they were called veggie burgers. And I mean, what is the actual value proposition? So if it's not healthier for you, then why am I going to make the switch?
Well,
because
this
you
is
disrupt
a brand.
the,
You just talked about how important the brands. They've branded
It is,
veggie
but the brand
burger.
has to stand for something, and you need to provide some value to the consumer. So what value are you providing other than not eating an animal, which for some is important, but for most, they don't equate going to McDonald's and getting a Big Mac to the cow that provided that meat.
Well, let me just jump in here. I think this is, again, just the beginning for this as well. Because as people are becoming more health conscious of what they consume, they don't want to consume animals, and they're aware of the environmental footprint of beef farming. So I think there's a lot of environmentalists and health conscious people who will continue to support this brand, and this brand will perfect this product offering. Right now there's a ton of sodium in there, right? That's what makes it taste good and keeps it together. But they will evolve, they will perfect, and there's going to be a market for this kind of stuff. And you could see other large players entering the market.
There is,
But James, I'm going to ask you a question.
Sure.
Would you, I mean, Intel years ago put their name on a computer, Intel aside. I stopped caring whether it was a Compaq or IBM. I just wanted the Intel chip.
Yeah, and I mean,
do you think fast food's going to surrender their brand and their extension, saying when I make a move in this place, it's going to be Beyond Meat, or are they going to start coming out with their own proprietary products?
Well, it's a good point. I mean, it's a branded patty basically, and when you go to get a burger, do you know what brand of patty that is? No. So look, I'll throw two words to the panel here that I think we need to think about as a future trend: whole and local. I think those are two trends when we talk about sustainability, carbon footprint, locally sourced foods, whether it's beef or vegetarian, and whole. So
We'll come back another day on that. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not moving into locally grown and locally sown. I want to move on again, and this is another one because this is incredible. This rock paper scissors that's happening. Who owns the customer? McDonald's. Well, I spent $1 trillion. I put the arches around the world. I trained my staff. My menu developed. Advertising. Even a clown convincing kids to buy Happy Burgers. And the next day, you know, Uber Eats or Skip the Dishes shows up. Who am I loyal to? My app? They can bring me the world that I want, or McDonald's? Are we dealing in a situation now where all the goodwill that's hidden on balance sheets, the value of the brands, are going to be eroded almost overnight because these apps act like a Trojan horse, penetrate your phone, and in doing so, start controlling the consumer and their behavior?
Look, I think, first of all, the food delivery business is actually a pretty crappy business, right? I think a lot of them reported last night, they're just not making any money. They're effectively spending $10 to make 8. So in terms of how long there'll be this many players, that remains to be seen. There'll probably be some consolidation. Now, when it comes to how restaurants can work with them, the challenge the food delivery apps have is they're just selling you commodity product. It's a person who delivers food. And I can beat you up on price, and then I can beat somebody else up on price. So I think the restaurants actually have more power in this game than the food delivery apps do.
But don't you think the restaurants are surrendering the power? Because I see somebody go down the street with Uber Eats, and they're coming to a sports stadium because the kids are too lazy to go to the store, and going, and one of them's getting KFC, and one's getting McDonald's. But we're both excited about the fact that Uber Eats brought it to me. Who owns the customer in that relationship?
I still think it's product wins. I still think that when I get that meal at my door, I'm happy that I got a Happy Meal and not an Uber delivered meal. I don't care about.
Yeah, I don't want an Uber hamburger. I want a McDonald's hamburger.
I just go to the site and go, is it Uber Eats or is it one of the other guys?
So you've never bought private label in the grocery store?
Sure, I do.
Well, why would you buy private label? Don't you want Coca-Cola? Why would you buy President's Choice Cola?
Because I prefer Coca-Cola.
But why do you go to private label?
Because in certain cases, the private label might be good enough. In this case, I mean, where the opportunity for the food delivery apps is if they start setting up the ghost kitchens where they can make their own meals and then ship them out. that's when they own the consumer.
Shipping whole and local foods.
There you go. See,
Because at the end of the day, today's consumer wants convenience. It's the app, right? I don't think it has anything to do with the brand necessarily in this case. If you want McDonald's, if you want KFC, you want an app that will get it for you.
A lot of them have their own apps.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not that difficult to develop your own app. If you want to buy, because delivery is a loss leader business. It always has been. Right? Delivery was created so you can get your product out there, and you would pay for that. And you'd hopefully attract people into your restaurant.
But Skip the Dishes and Uber are charging up to 30%.
But to Seti's point, yes, that's right. So they're eating into the local person's margin.
I think Skip the Dishes is eating the restaurant.
You could say that, but the restaurant doesn't have to list on.
So I want to go to another chess match we've got dealing with. When I grew up, the only thing you ever ordered was pizza. I knew the phone number by heart.
Yep.
We all did.
I mean, I don't,
Still do.
And so, how's the pizzas going to survive when this adventurous palate, when my app can get me anything? What a pizza place is going to have to do to sort of say, I'm still going to be part of that consideration set? Because you want sushi, and over here you want locally grown and owned, or whatever you're talking about. How are we going to survive as a pizza chain?
Develop your own app, number one. You want to get outreach, right? At the end of the day, it's about the bottom line. So if your top line is growing, but your bottom line is not, you have a problem. So you want to get it into as many hands or mouths as you possibly can. And one way to do that, and to your point earlier, you're right, these delivery services take a significant margin or bite out of your profit. So develop your own app. It's not that difficult.
I bet you, develop your own app and put it where? Because the average consumer is going, I've already got too many apps.
Well, no, but if you want to look, and then this is the angle you use, right? You could say it's local. Don't let these big multinational companies displace your local eatery.
Would you put a local eatery app on your phone?
If I have a restaurant and I want to be in the delivery game, don't forget, once you're in the delivery game, you're saying something about what segment of the market you're attracting.
I'm moving on. I'm taking, as a judge in the court, I think if I'm waking up to tomorrow morning as McDonald's or anybody else and I look at Skip the Dishes, I'm going, I'm losing control of that because the data is with Skip the Dishes, and I think the data matters most. I want to go to one that I know you're going to be passionate about, which is this whole concept of a revolution in college sports. How dare they play the athletes who are the heroes that pack the stadiums, the revenue they generate fund most of the university, the audacity that they want to let these kids now start earning a few bucks, getting their own endorsement deals. Are you for this? And if so, do you think this is just the beginning of what could be a massive transformation on where the revenue pie is going to be split up in college sports?
Let me start by saying something controversial. First of all, yes, these athletes should be paid. Absolutely. They're the ones that generate the revenue for these schools. They should be paid. I would take it one step further and say the profits from these athletic programs should be put back into the schools to reduce tuition levels for every student. Because the tuition levels are ridiculous. You're paying $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year for tuition. Meanwhile, your academic programs are making billions of dollars, and you're not paying the people who make you those billions. There's a fundamental disconnect there, and I think there needs to be a wholesale examination of how this system
So like a hospital has a parking lot for revenue, saying my sports team should be creating enough revenue to reduce tuition. Interesting point. What's your thought on that?
It's $1 billion industry. The NCAA drives $1 billion of revenue every year. My only point I would say, and this is how pro sports is starting to build their collective bargaining agreements, not every student deserves to get paid. In fact, there's probably a small percentage that's probably driving most of the interest in the sport. And I know it's more than of a team game at the college level, but we still got to think about the value driver, and it's usually the top performing athletes.
So what top performing athlete is going to want to have an equal pie? They're going to want to have more than their fair share.
I think they deserve their fair share. If I'm going to be a pure capitalist, I'm going to say, okay, at least take it out of the hands of the schools a little bit and give it to the top recruits and the people that are going to be pro.
80% of the players in the field are going to bloody, so that the few handful of athletes make
80% of the players are lucky to be there.
Honestly, I think you let the free market decide. I'm fine with paying the players because if you take a look at something like the NFL, there's no viable minor league outside of the NCAA. So for players to get into the NFL, there's only one way to do that, and that's to go play in the NCAA and sacrifice their body and risk a future career on potentially getting injured.
Not the CFL? The CFL is not a minor league.
So what do you think about the argument that they make saying, look, these people are already treated with scholarships, they've got the alumni take good care of them, if you sweep the floor once a week, you can buy yourself a nice new car. I mean, there's a lot of things that are happening. What do you think about that argument that says, hey, we're already producing scholarships for the school?
Yeah, it holds no water, because if you're the one responsible for generating billions or multi-millions of dollars, and okay, what's the value of your scholarship and your accommodation? $100,000, right? So you're going to say, come on, guys, I generate all these millions and this is what you're paying me?
And the thing
It's
is,
like
for
paying
students
Austin Matthews,
yeah, but,
$50,000 a year.
Yeah,
Would you do
but
that?
for students that are going in and getting a tuition paid, they're basically staying there until they can get drafted into a professional league. So a lot of them will go in for the one and done because that's just a ticket into the league. If you're paying them, there's probably a better opportunity that they would stay in school, probably get that education, and then when they go out and play professionally, if that doesn't work out, then at least they have something to fall back on.
Happening in basketball, guys are going overseas.
So let me pivot to you, James, and you're going to love this because it's called locally grown. I'm a locally grown athlete, and I was thinking of Duke or seeing one of the powerhouses, which is really you got to say this, the Pareto effect holds. There's a handful of universities that allow the kind of revenue they generate. But now I'm not going to go out there because if I stay local, I can cut a nice little deal with a car dealership, get a couple ads. Is that going to destabilize the entire league because those flagship brands that hold this entire industry together are no longer going to have the same recruiting teeth because they can't get the same deals?
I don't know. I mean, here in Toronto, where we're filming, it's we have such a talent pool of basketball players, and we actually have some pretty good institutions on the collegiate level to support some talent, potentially an NCAA type of competition. I would love to be able to throw more incentive for our local players to stay. So that's my only take on that. But if it makes Canadian players more competitive, I'm down.
But Tony, I would say the opposite will happen. If you diversify that revenue pool, the base, where smaller markets can, athletes will be attracted to smaller markets because they're getting paid, it might mean a little more parity. It might mean that a lot of these big schools won't have the power that they once had.
So talking about parity, though, a lot of the money that's generated out of the flagship sports goes for scholarships, and we know we need gender parity. You have to have the equal amount of scholarships for both sexes, and some of those scholarships go into sports that would never even catch a camera's lens. But that athlete still has a chance to get it. Are you willing to sacrifice that for the sake of making a handful of athletes wealthier?
Probably not. I mean,
It's a false proposition.
Yeah.
It's not an either or. I think there's more than enough money to fund, let's say, sports that are not as widely watched, while at the same time paying the people who generate the revenues for you. And I would say, to my previous point, you can put some more money into the kitty to make tuition more affordable.
It's a big, like we said, it's $1 billion.
It's a huge.
It is, but honestly, the payment should be commensurate with the revenue that sport draws.
Sure.
Right,
So,
and I think that's more than fair.
So survival of the fittest. That's where the wealth should go. The ones that catch the eyeballs win. So we're not talking about university in the sense of amateur athletes anymore. Whatever rises to the top is what we should focus on.
I didn't tell you what sport to choose.
Well, whatever sport. Well, you look at the mainstream sports, they're the ones that are going to get the attention.
People watch football in college and they watch basketball.
Okay,
That's
so,
where.
So now I want to move on. We just had an election in Canada. Well, all four parties seem to be fighting to who could out left who in terms of their deficits and such. But we're living on probably the longest era of prosperity. And now if you start listening to the whispers out there, and a lot of pretty important people are coming out saying there could be a recession coming. Talk to me about your thoughts if there's a recession coming, and has Canada got enough powder left to make sure that we can invest in the kind of stimulus programs that can keep our economy, at the very least, having a soft landing versus crashing into the corner?
Undoubtedly, Tony. We've got more than enough powder. Right now, our debt service payments are about 1% of our GDP, which is minuscule. OECD estimates that 15% is a sufficient level. So do we have enough room to maneuver? Absolutely. I don't see a recession coming. I don't see where the impetus for a recession is. You got global growth rates that are being revised downwards that are challenging, but there's no, other than these crazy trade skirmishes, and let's call them that, I think the global economy is not in bad shape.
No. I saw beef and pork. We're back online with China on that front.
No bull.
No bull. And, we got the oil proposition. We got to sort that out. That's a longer term issue.
Yes.
And we didn't figure it out this election. And then I don't know. I don't want to.
It was the lack of leadership that didn't figure it out.
Yeah. So all I would say is I just hope we avoid an East-West conflict on that front. But
what are you?
I don't honestly see a major catalyst for a recession. Like, a recession doesn't happen just because we've been in a boom period for too long a period of time. Something has to drive it. But realistically, the housing is still strong, unemployment is low, interest rates are more than reasonable, inflation is in line. You got net immigration coming in.
But you look at the economists, they say, yeah, we have low unemployment, but there's no real wage growth.
That's not in the States. There has been real wage growth.
But in Canada, which we're
In
talking
Canada,
about.
it's been minor, and
And a lot of the job increases that we're seeing are really the government hiring and getting bigger and investing more.
We've had certain sectors that have experienced phenomenal growth, and actually we've been a benefactor of people wanting to flee the U.S., particularly in the high-tech sector and biochem sector, come to Canada.
So you think we got to make some big bets in there. What's happening in Alberta? Is that going to impact foreign investment when they start saying, am I going to invest long-term in a country where now 2 provinces are rattling the sabers?
Well, I think we're about to test that thesis with Saudi Aramco going public. They're floating 1 or 2% of their company, the world's largest oil producer. And we'll see what the appetite is for oil exposure outside of Canada. We might see, we saw it in Canada as well, but that's a lot to digest.
But Canada moved for other reasons.
Sure, yeah, fair enough.
This is Adele's Report. We'll see you next time. I'm Tony Chatham.